Welcome back, everyone. Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. I'm so happy to be here right now with author, lecturer, researcher Brien Foerster. Brien, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks, Chris. How about you?
I'm very good. I very much enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Fascinating stuff. I'd like to first talk about, you showed a slide where there's a possible discovery of what could be Atlantis in Africa. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a site called the Richat structure. If you look it up on the internet, it's RICHAT. And the conventional story is that it's either a collapsed volcano or the site of an asteroid impact. But no one really knows, and almost nobody ever goes there or has been there. It's very difficult to get to. It's in Mauritania, which is in Western Africa. A friend of mine, Josh, who's a journalist, went there, spent thousands upon thousands of dollars to get there. And it's like a lawless area. You can find it on Google Earth, and you can zoom in very close. There appear to be little buildings there, but you can't get close enough to get any detail. But he went on the ground and filmed it for at least a full day. And it doesn't appear that there's anything too amazing about it, unfortunately. So it's the same diameter that the city of Atlantis was supposed to be. But he was very disappointed, having done all of that work to get there, to find out that it's probably just something that looks, it's a natural thing that looks interesting. The position of it is beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what Plato said it would be. And most people think Atlantis was a continent in the Atlantic. Supposedly there's more spoken about the actual city of Atlantis than that. And so it appeared to be a good candidate, but unfortunately it didn't turn out to be something to pursue, at least not for me.
Right, okay. Very interesting. And then you were also talking about the major cataclysms that occurred throughout history that most likely wiped out these advanced civilizations. And you were talking about one in particular in Greenland that meteorite had a massive impact. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that discovery is only a year to a year and a half old, and it's only because of modern technology with ground penetrating radar from airplanes or from actually satellites probably that they found this. It's what they discovered was an impact of an asteroid made of nickel and iron that was a mile in diameter. And so something like that, like I was saying in my talk, if you have a comet that hits the Earth, since the comet is 90+% ice, it's not going to have that much of an impact, because when ice hits land, the ice gives away. But if you have something that's metallic striking, then it's going to make a huge impact. It created a crater 31 kilometers in diameter, I think, and had the force of 47 million Hiroshima bombs. So that would have been a major thing. There's also evidence of other impacts that may have happened around the same time period. And it could be that happened at the beginning of what's called the Younger Dryas, which would be 12,800 years ago, which is also when the end of the last ice age happened.
Very interesting.
So that would have been an extinction event.
Yes, and they had even before that event, they've had many of these cataclysms occur throughout our history, right?
Yeah, I think on average every 13,000 years.
Every third, and with everything that's happening with our climate changing and the threats in space, do you think that within our lifetime that we would have to worry about one of these cataclysms again?
Well, we're within the time window. Since this happened 12,800 years ago, and the average is 13, then we're 200 years away. But it's not like you're looking at a clock. Like there is some variability in terms of when it would occur. So it could happen in our lifetime, or we could miss it by 10 generations or more, maybe.
Now, you were when we go to when you were speaking about the megalithic structures in Peru, in Cusco, the cutting of the blocks, you said that seemed to be individually cut and placed, and it seems to baffle modern day academia. academia as to why they did it that way. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's not logical when you're building a building to have every block a different shape and size. Because if you have continuity, if you have a standard size like a brick, then you know how many bricks you require to go a certain distance. But to have everyone a different shape and size means that you're individually, I wouldn't even say handcrafting it, you're crafting each one individually to fit into place with the other ones. And any stonemason that I've taken there to look at it, they say it's completely illogical to do this that way. But obviously it was done.
And if you had to theorize, why would you think that they had done it that way?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing about the megalithic structures were that the stones were meant to interlock with one another, so that the whole structure wound up being as if it was a single piece of stone. And why would you want that? Probably for resonance or vibrational reasons, that the whole thing was supposed to be energized and vibrate as a single unit. That's why no mortar would be used, because mortar would be like an insulator. It would dampen the energy as the energy is moving through the structure. So that's, again, one of the mysteries.
I also found it very interesting when you were talking about how the Inka came later on and they built on top of these structures and around, and it's very obvious when you were showing, you can see the dramatic differences in the construction the Inka used versus these previous advanced civilizations. Talk a little bit about, the differences that you noticed.
Well, it's night and day, because the megalithic work, each stone is an individual's unique shape and size. The stones three-dimensionally interlock with one another. And then with the Inka work, you have clay mortar with rough stone, packed together. So the Inka work, almost anybody could do, but the megalithic work, even, as I said, stonemasons and engineers who look at it and say, I don't know how it was done, and I don't know why you would go to this extent, because it's crazy. It's not for, people keep saying it's for earthquake proofing, but it's beyond that.
Right. And when you look at the H blocks in Pumapunka, the cuts with laser precision, and it's also, you said, it's a mystery what exactly they were used for. Any theories on what the H blocks could have been used for?
That's really up in the air, but what we do know is that originally there were probably 9 of them, because that's what we find there. We don't find the little town of Tiwanaku, which is next door. The colonial Spanish, and even before that, they took stone from Pumapunku and Tiwanaku to build foundations of their buildings and houses. We don't find any H blocks incorporated because they're a very weird shape. When you're building a foundation, you want something consistent, with probably flat surfaces to set into place. So they're a real anomaly. The main thing about them is each one's a different shape and size. They're not as if they were made in a mold, all exactly the same, and that adds another layer of complexity to the question.
And they also have strange magnetic properties.
Oh, very, very. Yeah.
What happens with the compass when you move it along the H blocks?
Well, some stones are more dramatic than others, but for example, the H blocks, they have an insert in the top and insert in the bottom. And when you take with one of them especially, you take a compass and you're away from the stone, so the compass is registering the standard magnetic field and direction that it should be doing, like north, south, east, and west. And then when you take it in to the end of the insert, the compass needle will move by 270 degrees. And then when you pull it back out, it'll correct itself back to the normal magnetism that it should be showing. So it's obviously this magnetite in the stone itself, and the stone was likely chosen for its magnetic properties. But again, why that was is another big question.
Yes, very interesting. Now, for the last half of our little talk, I'd like to talk about your second presentation, the Elongated Skulls of Peru. Now, in Cusco, the skulls that were found were not only the largest, you said, but they had red hair, which was not a native characteristic, right?
Right. Well, when we think of native people of the Americas, we think of, in general, dark-skinned people with straight black hair with brown eyes. I mean, almost anywhere you go, we find 100% indigenous people. That's the look, and that's consistent with the migration of people 12,000 plus years ago from Southeast Asia area. But what we find with the Paracas is genetically dark red hair, the likelihood of lightish skin, and possibly green or blue eyes. So that's what makes them an anomaly.
Yes, and when you brought scientists to look at these, it actually baffles them because they can see that it's not the headboarding that was the tradition among some of the natives, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, headboarding was done by noble babies for many different cultures, but you have to ask, where would that have come from? Like, why would you do that? It's a dangerous procedure and drastic. And so, of course, it probably means that they knew of people from before that actually looked like that genetically. And that's what the work we're doing with the Paracas on the coast of Peru. We have skulls that obviously appear to be natural in shape, that are very elongated. And over the course of breeding with normal people, you begin to have the skull shrinking in size. And so the headboarding is a way to maintain that shape of head.
And these types of elongated skulls are found really all over the world, but also near these megalithic sites and structures, correct?
Yeah, even at Stonehenge, they found
Yeah.
ancient people with elongated heads. And at all the major megalithic sites in Peru and Bolivia, that's what you see.
When you looked at the DNA results, it was very fascinating what came back that I believe it was on the mother's side, of course, it was human DNA, but on the father's, it was unknown. Can you talk a little bit about those results?
Yeah, well, again, the problem is that these people lived 2,000 plus years ago. And so when you're trying to test the DNA is broken down so much that it's in tiny fragments, and only the most sophisticated programs in the world at 10 laboratories in the world can recombine the DNA digitally in order to be able to get a pattern of what was going on. And then the nuclear DNA it's the father's, and it's much, much smaller and more difficult to get. So we're still working on trying to get the nuclear DNA tested. But the mitochondrial mother's DNA is not as difficult.
Now, in closing, do you think that modern day academia is ever going to catch up to what independent researchers like yourself are finding out and maybe one day admit that they were wrong and you guys are onto something?
No, I don't think they will.
No.
And I don't find it to be important anymore. It used to be that everything had to go through academia, through the peer review process, and that's why a lot of stuff has been rejected by them. Not because it's not scientific work that's been done, it's just they don't like the result. And that's not a scientific approach. You're supposed to be in pursuit of the truth, not in pursuit of something that fits into your paradigm. So it's up to independent researchers and going to events like this to show the general public, because it belongs to the people of the world. It doesn't belong to a small society or group.
Yeah, I love that you said that it doesn't matter anymore.
No.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Brien. Awesome
My
presentation.
pleasure.
And you enjoy the rest of the conference.
I will. Thank you.
All right, thank you.